I greet you in the name of the one and only. The topic is the love of Rumi, which in essence is the love of God. And an individual becomes a vehicle and a source of reflection. But in essence, we do not love anything other than God. When we express it to another, it is only because under the circumstances where humans don't have an alternative. I have a poem that I just translated. This is a brand new translation. It might get revised, I'm sure it will, later on. For those of you who do not know much about Rumi, let me read you a just brief description of something I had written, and because it was written, it was handy, and I will share that with you. The title is In the Cosmic World of a Lotus. Rumi's poetry is a treatise on interactive divine love, and here the keyword is interactive. So sometimes when we pray, we think we are doing an obligation as in a ritual, but the idea is that if you really think about it, you're interacting with the divine. From the very start, the Surah Fatiha is where the divine talks to you, and you talk to the divine in the words of the divine. Rumi's divine love that we are talking about, it nurtures the spiritual stirrings in the depth of the human heart. Rumi employs the poetic vernacular to the optimum in his search to find a blueprint for the path to perfection. Through his supplications, contemplations, meditations, as well as his lyrical yearnings for the divine love, Rumi weaves the weft of mysticism from the woof of Quranic fiber, turning it into a woolen cloak that mantles the pious and the pure. Rumi's magnum opus, the Mathnawi Ma'nawi, or the spiritual couplets, begin with a calling for the reed flute as a longing to rejoin its original source in eternity. In the suspense between reason and rhyme, Rumi clarifies the mythical to the ascetic and the aesthetic to the mystified. While words can never convey the full depth of thought, poetic parlance occasionally compensates for this inadequacy as it attempts to reveal the jealously guarded meaning from behind the veils of seclusion, where meaning is woven from metaphors and allegories beyond the literal and the interpretive. Rumi's poetry defies cultural and linguistic stereotyping, despite attempts to reduce the universality of his thought to cultural confines. Rumi's work has been translated beyond place and time so that the beauty of thought does not surrender to vernacular dominance, nor is it sacrificed at the altar of poetic niceties. The mind journeys in the footsteps of the heart and realizes that the peace of mind is a mere temporality towards attaining the tranquility of the soul, with the ultimate aim of arriving at the state of being content and contented with the divine through subconscious connectedness. There, one hopes for a fleeting glimpse of a spiritual ambience that soothes the soul in the sublime. While clarity and ambiguity play their games through a discourse of linguistic simplicity and philosophical complexity, Rumi artfully simplifies challenging thoughts and beautifully infuses complex issues by inviting us into the garden of the Mathnawi, whence bridges span horizons between the violet mist of daybreak and the magenta dusk of nightfall. In the realm of the imaginal, one may glimpse the beauty of thought, flourishing as a lotus on the serene surface of a reflective pond, gazing into the indigo firmament for inspiration, while firmly grounded in the nurturing womb of the earth beneath. As the blue-violet hue of the lotus petals unfurl around the stamen in contemplation, one may be able to lift up layers of unfolding meanings from the lotus and life. Like Rumi, you too may spin in the cosmic world of the sacred lotus with the resonance of a voice within. And the voice within is the divine calling. Sometimes it is audible for our ears out here, and sometimes it is in the heart. The poem I've translated, or I've titled this one, Hidden in the Heart. I will recite the poem in Dari Persian first, so that you could feel how Rumi is yearning and pleading and begging. It's an interaction between the human and the divine in a way that you will never understand if you had never been in love. So when Rumi is called the poet of love, it is not that he's just penning lyrics for songs and music, although his poetry is very, very musical. But when it's driven from within, when the inspiration is pouring out of you and you can't stop it, and you can't stop to hold it back. Most of you probably didn't have the experience of being in love, but I am. So I'm a bit presumptuous. You just feel like crazy. That craziness is the absolute necessity of it. Because love is not a theory and a philosophy to be discussed and explained. Love is to be felt. And that's why when we are talking about the pleading and the yearning and the longing and the rejoining and the connecting with the divine, is that it's the feeling that drives the whole thing. Sometimes, if people have talents, the wording follows, but they are not necessary. And that's why Rumi's pen name is Silence, because in it, the futility of words is silently expressed. ای با من و پنهان چو دل از دل سلامت می کنم ای با من و پنهان چو دل از دل سلامت می کنم تو کعبه هر جا روم قصد مقامت می کنم هر جا که هستی حاضری از دور در ما ناظری شب خانه روشن می شود چون یاد نامت می کنم گه همچو باز آشنا بر دست تو پر می زنم گه همچو باز آشنا بر دست تو پر می زنم گه چون کبوتر پرزنان آهنگ بامت می کنم گر غایبی هر دم چرا آسیب بر دل می زنم گر غایبی هر دم چرا آسیب بر دل می زنم ور حاضری پس من چرا در سینه دامت می کنم دوری وطن لیک از دلم اندر دل تو روزنی است زان روزن دزدیده من چون مه پیامت می کنم ای آفتاب از دور تو بر ما فرستی نور تو ای جان هر مهجور تو جان را غلامت می کنم من آینه دل را ز تو اینجا صقالی می دهم من گوش خود را دفتر لطف کلامت می کنم در گوش تو در هوش تو و اندر دل پرجوش تو اینها چی باشد تو منی وین وصف عامت می کنم ای دل نه اندر ماجرا می گفت آن دلبر تو را هر چند از تو کم شود از خود تمامت می کنم ای چاره در من چاره گر حیران شو و نظاره گر بنگر کز این جمله صور این دم کدامت می کنم گه راست مانند الف گه کژ چو حرف مختلف یک لحظه پخته می شوی یک لحظه خامت می کنم گر سالها ره می روی چون مهره در دست من چیزی که رامش می کنی زان چیز رامت می کنم ای شه حسام الدین حسن می گوی با جانان که من جان را غلاف معرفت بهر حسامت می کنم جان را غلاف معرفت بهر حسامت می کنم O thou with me, but hidden like the heart, I greet thee from the depth of my being. Thou art the Kaaba, hence I turn to thee wherever I go. Where thou art present and watching me from a distance. At night, the house of this heart lights up at the mention of thy name. Like a trained falcon, sometimes I flap my wings on your resting arm. Sometimes I fly to your rooftop like a messenger pigeon. If thou art hidden within, why do I entertain thy thoughts within my heart? If thou art present within, why am I trying to ensnare you? If thou art distant, why this intimacy in my heart? From that cleft intimacy, I am secretly sending you this message. O thou, O sun who sendest me these rays of light, O thou, the soul and source of every yearning, to thee I surrender. I polish the mirror of my heart with the light of thy glory. In my whole being I become an ear, a receptacle for every utterance of thy grace. Thou art the hearing in my thoughts. Thou art the throbbing in my heart. But these matter not. Thou art the I in me, as I brazenly praise thee. O heart, tell me what thou hast conspired with the beloved. Whatever you lose in the bargain, this self of mine shall restore it. O resolute remedy of all, thou art the answer to my adversities. O steadfast witness, look and see which of these bewildered perceptions I assign to thee. Sometimes thou art straight like the letter Aleph, sometimes twisted like any other. One moment you are ripe within the grasp of my knowing, the next you are still green in my sight. Like a prayer bead, for years thou hast been tracking on the string in my hand. I have been trying to train thee while thou hast tamed me. O noble Hisamuddin, tell the beloved that I'm turning my soul into a sheath to contain the dagger of thy gnosis. The first two lines, O thou with me, but hidden like the heart, I greet thee from the depth of my being. Thou art the Kaaba, hence I turn to thee wherever I go. I think the message is clear, but what we often forget is that we humans have the habit of seeing the divine in the only image that we know, which is a human image. So as much as we can say that humans were created in the image of God, the reverse is equally true. We create God through our own perception. Not that is the essence of God, but that is the necessary reflective mirror that we can hold before us so that we can feel that we are not talking into the void, but there is a, for lack of a better term, a person, an entity, a being that responds to us. If we really felt like we are only talking to ourselves, we'll be bordering on insanity. So in order to stay away from the insanity, we have to have a perception of the divine in one form or another. And as much as that is unnecessary, philosophically, it is very essential for our reflection and deflection and the echo of the call we make. Like in the mountains, that's where the word echo comes from. That's where God is realized. That's where we hear from the emptiness of the space. Where thou art present and watching me from a distance. At night, the house of this heart lights up at the mention of thy name. The heart is the realm of the divine. If you can feel it, but it takes time. And if you can do that which lights up within you, that's what we can call the spirit. That's what we can call the ruh. That's what drives us. That's what moves us. Like a trained falcon, sometimes I flap my wings on your resting arm. Sometimes I fly to your rooftop like a messenger pigeon. The contrast between the falcon that hunts and the pigeon that is often its victim. And if we use the perpetrator of the action in a more violent way, we go to the level of the animal instinct within us. But if you use the metaphor, the lover and the beloved have that kind of a relationship. One flies after. Once you're drawn, once you fall in love, nothing matters. And if anything matters, then you're not in love. And that's why when the idea is to have a full concentration with the divine, as one of the great Sufi thinkers from Afghanistan, the Pir of Herat, Ansari, he would be praying or trying to pray or trying to start his prayer 1,000 times a night, because every time he turned to his Qibla, something would bother him, thinking that, did I have the utmost sincerity of the heart to do what I'm supposed to? He would question his sincerity and start all over, thinking, I can do better. And it will get to a point where he would almost miss his evening prayers. So then he will settle for whatever was possible. So in that draw and pull, you can be the falcon, you can be the pigeon. And we use the allegory of Habib and Mahbub, the lover and the beloved, interchangeably and exchangeably between the human and the divine. We use it often in respect to the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, that he is the Habib of God, but he is also the Mahbub of God. So when he is the Habib, God is the Mahbub. When God is the Habib, he is the Mahbub. Now, transpose that attribute from the Prophet to every one of us, and we can have that lover and beloved relationship with God. I happen to believe that the best worship is to love God. The rituals are for others. That's organized religion. That is your social obligation. That is your identity parading in front of the public. It does not matter to God. What matters to God is what's in your heart. Don't tell me you don't have it. If thou art hidden within, why do I entertain thy thoughts within my heart? If thou art present within, why am I trying to ensnare you? That is the biggest mystery. That when we are looking for God, we use the word look, the verb, as an object for which we think the eyes are to be employed. And where are the eyes looking? Outside of you. So everybody's looking for God somewhere over there. And most of us can't find it. What is meant by looking is the vision within. It's the eye of the heart, not the eyes of the head. So when you go to your heart and you turn back within you and you find the God within you, you have the vision. Don't worry about the sight. And so, if thou art distant, why this intimacy in my heart? From that cleft intimacy, I'm secretly sending you this message, like you look through a patch of clouds to a rising moon. And you're mesmerized. And then you wonder, what is on the other side? There is no other side. Space is irrelevant. O thou, O sun who sendest me these rays of light, O thou, the soul and source of every yearning, to thee I surrender. This is the greatest worship in the sense that when you surrender, yes, symbolically you bow and then you prostrate and we do all these things. And if people are watching, we do it a few extra times. But the real surrender has to happen from within. That is, you give up your centrality. You realize, acknowledge, confess, and believe that within you there's nothing but God. And so if you've been thinking of yourself as the center of the universe, some of us do sometimes, in essence, it is the divine. And if it is not, then you're worshiping your own ego. That's your nafs. So in the polarity between human and God, you have to gravitate towards God, make God the central point so you can be left in the periphery. When you're in the periphery, you're nothing, you're irrelevant, and that's fine. Because the more you become less, the more the God becomes the most, and you have then acknowledged it. I polish the mirror of my heart with the light of thy glory. In my whole being I become an ear, a receptacle for every utterance of thy grace. We say that the heart has an eye. Well, you probably didn't know. Yes, also has an ear. And oftentimes when psychologists and therapists are referring to something like the internal dialogue, if you can turn that internal dialogue into an internal monologue, yes, it may appear as an insanity because you are talking to yourself, but that other self is the self. There is a self with a lowercase s, that's your ego. And there is a self with an uppercase s, which is the divine totality. So, yes, you could consider narcissism, self-worshipping, also as worshipping the divine. So it's very easy to get confused. Sometimes when we read, and especially when we pray, we start with a reference to shaitan. What do you think the shaitan is? Shaitan is not a person. It's not an entity outside of you, but it's that same shadow lurking here. If you cannot make the distinction of that which is within you, whether it's the divine or the nafs that you worship, that's the distinction between worshiping God or worshiping yourself. And we often do that. So when Rumi says that I'm an ear, a receptacle for every utterance of thy grace, this is the utterance that we can hear in our heart. Yes, it was audible in the cave of Hira. When the Prophet heard it, the command, read, and he didn't know what was happening. Yeah, it will drive you crazy too, if you don't know where it's coming from. Thou art the hearing in my thoughts. Thou art the throbbing in my heart, but these matter not. Thou art the I in me, as I brazenly praise thee. Sometimes the smallest part of the language is the most significant one. Thou art the hearing in my thoughts, not the hearing of my thoughts. So when we say the hearing of the thought, it comes from outside. But if the hearing is in the thought, then we go one step further. Not only does the heart has the ability to hear, but even the thought within it has the ability to hear. So your thinking can be personified and giving the faculty of hearing. So hear from the within of the within of the within. If it doesn't make sense, you got it. You are the throbbing in my heart. Again, not the throbbing of the heart. They are not two separate things. No, that which moves you. The name of your group is Coffee and Converts. And my favorite part is, again, a very small part of it, is the verb part, V-E-R, from Latin. That which moves, moving towards. So moving from point A to point B, from the self to God. And so long as you're moving, you're in essence living the essence of your being. So what is the most important part that is moving within us? When that movement stops, we are no longer. It's the throbbing of the heart, the sign between life and death. That throbbing is God, the divine. But these matter not, Rumi says. Thou art the I in me, as I brazenly praise thee. The I in me, remember we talked earlier about that the nafs, the I could be the other I too. And I perhaps, due to some subconscious narcissism of our English-speaking culture, I is the only pronoun we capitalize next to any other pronoun that we use for God Almighty. Unaware of it, right? So there, if you can blend the two together, one of the I is the divine within your heart, and the other one, of course, you always point to that. So the I and the me could be one and the same. And when you feel that, when you feel the deep connection between the two, that's when, from the point of your spiritual emotionality, if I'm coining a word here, which is, I think, what Hallaj felt when he denied himself in such totality that the only thing he could see within himself was the divine. So when he said, Anna al-Haq, he was not putting himself next to God. That would be shirk. He was denying himself so that God's oneness in its absoluteness can be recognized as the only entity that deserves to be known. And Rumi is switching pronouns here. He talks to God about the heart. Now he's talking to the heart about God. O heart, tell me what thou hast conspired with the beloved. Whatever you lose in the bargain, this self of mine shall restore it. If we have the love triangle between the God, the heart, and the human, sometimes you get a little suspicious in love, don't you? Not that you love the person any less, but because you want to make sure that nobody and nothing else loves that person more than you do. So jealousy has its positive side to it, because you're denying any indifference in it. So Rumi is talking to his heart like, wait a minute, if the heart of a believer is the seat of the Almighty, what was going on there when I was kicked out of it? I want to be there, I want to listen, I want to understand. So he is telling his heart, don't give me up. Whatever God gives you, I'll give you more. And in love, all that there is giving, not taking. Taking is for business. Giving is for love. O resolute remedy of all, thou art the answer to my adversities. O steadfast witness, look and see which of these bewildered perceptions I assign to thee. This is perhaps one Well, let's take the perhaps out of it. This is my favorite. And it's my favorite because I believe that in order for us to be really living purposefully, meaningfully, spiritually, then the movement within us has to be the movement of the heart, the throbbing, and the movement of the mind, the continuous thinking. And thinking in what? In that which we often refer to as zikr. But zikr is not a remembrance. That yes, you remember that there is God. It's not the utterance, because it doesn't have to be sounded. It doesn't have to be uttered or pronounced. The remembrance then is that every time you think, if you think you're thinking in God, again, pay attention to the preposition. If you're thinking in God, you have to be thinking that whatever you were thinking of God before is not valid anymore. In other words, from my own practice, I wake up to worship a different God every day. Now, not that there are more than one God, but that if I have not seen the beauty of God in a different light, in every progressing moment of my living, of my being, then I have not paid the due and the gratitude to the one who deserves to be known at that level. So if you are making your tasbih, God is great, there must be difference between the first utterance and the second one. Otherwise, it's a habit. Habit kills creativity. God is creator, the creator, and you ought to be the creator of the creator in your perception. And so, when we have all the different perceptions of the divine, and as Rumi says, look and see which of these bewildered perceptions I assign to thee. That I have all these different images, just to use an allegory. God, Allah, Bhagwan, Yahweh. I mean, you can come up with so many names. And if we are attached to the concept, to the word, to the language, then there are so many gods. But that's not so. The linguistic representations, as well as the individual human perceptions, may vary. And they ought to vary, because we all think for ourselves. In the recent controversy whether Muslims and Christians believe in the same God, it's the most ridiculous thing. Because you can't even find two Christians who will perceive God the same way, or two Muslims, or two any humans. Because we are not thinking for another, we are thinking for ourselves. And our perceptions are created with that individuality. So the multiplicity is our domain. The worship is of the absolute one. And that's not a mathematical one. Sometimes thou art straight like the letter Aleph, sometimes twisted like any other. One moment you are ripe within the grasp of my knowing, the next you are still green in my sight. So this explains the ineffability of the divine. That at any point you reach a conclusion, oh, now I know what God is like. In that very moment it becomes invalid. Because you keep thinking. And you ought to be. As Rumi says that I think the first part is simply a symbolic for those of you who do Arabic calligraphy or the writing. Aleph, which is the first letter of God, is the straight line, pointing which way? Yeah, either way. So every other letter is crooked and bending left and right and whatever. Like those other letters don't know where they are going, right? But Aleph does. So Rumi is playing on the transcription, on the writing, on the calligraphy, pointing to the divine in that sense. And then he is changing the metaphor that sometimes you're right within the grasp of my knowing. Like, I mean, a ripe fruit in the tree, and when you're just trying to get to it, that you realize that maybe it's not ripe. So sometimes you see it as green, not ready, and sometimes it's ripe, because it's the levels at which you arrive at a conclusion within yourself, and of course a temporary conclusion that, now I realize what God is. And you know how to spell backwards and forwards, it's the same. The point is that you have to be constantly moving with it, that the is not a point to stop. The perpetuity of the thought is the necessary part. Like a prayer beat, for years thou hast been tracking on a string in my hand. I have been trying to train thee while thou hast tamed me. So when you do the tasbih, the beats, what are you saying? With each one you use the name of God, right? So it seems like God is in your hand, under your control. And with every beat that you turn, you know where it's going to end. And you start all over, and you keep saying it, often out of habit. But Rumi is saying that I thought I was sending you on the track of this string, that I knew where you were falling, the next one and the next one. And in the process, I realized that no, it is you that have tamed me, that are holding me back. And he is playing a game on the word. Husamuddin was Rumi's favorite student. He is the one who requested that Rumi start writing the spiritual couplets. And just like I was telling you earlier, that you need an echo chamber of sorts. Rumi became Rumi because he had someone to whom he could talk and did not feel that he was, speaking in a vacuum. Remember the rabbi by the West Wall, when someone asked him, like, you've been coming here for years, do you think your prayer is going to reach anywhere? And the rabbi said, well, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to the wall. We too could be talking to the wall. But Rumi found a wall that could respond, and that was Shams, his mentor. And when Shams disappeared, he found another man and said, come over here and just sit there. And this other man was illiterate, he didn't know anything, but he had the sincerity of the heart. And Rumi said, I don't care. I have to have a receptacle, I have to have an echo chamber, I have to have someone who could respond to me, that I know I'm talking to someone. And when the second man died, he asked Husamuddin to come. And Husamuddin was, of course, his very, very young student. And his name means the sword or dagger. And he's playing a game on that word, saying, O noble Husamuddin, tell the beloved that I'm turning my soul into a sheath to contain the dagger of thy gnosis. So this is the gnosis of the human, of his student, in essence. Also, remember, he was talking to God, then he turned to talk to the heart about God. remember the bargain? Now he is taking one step further, and he's kind of waking up to his environs, like, wait a minute, where am I? Islamic Center of Southern California. So once he checks the GPS, and he finds that Hossamuddin is sitting in front of him, so he addresses him directly, telling him, "Oh, noble Hossamuddin, tell the beloved," now you tell God, "tell the beloved that I'm turning my soul into a sheath to contain the dagger of thy gnosis." And dagger or sword is used in Islamic mysticism as the separator of truth from falsehood, and the discernment, the one that makes separation between the black and the white. So it is not the dagger we are talking about that is used in most of the violences around the world. Not that one. Here is only a metaphor to make that distinction between that which is false and that which is absolute truth. And with the absolute truth, I stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, right?
Wasn't Husamaji also actually described, wrote down the Masnavi for Rumi as he recited it?
At least one. I think there were several, and this became more, I think, a tradition with Shams, because Shams was this overflowing fountain of knowledge. He didn't care about the conventions and formalities of somebody taking notes and footnotes and explanation. He was just going on and on. And so finally they realized that since there's no way of stopping him, let's take advantage of the opportunity and write as much as we can. So several people would say, okay, you take the next paragraph, I have to start here. And then that also became the tradition with Rumi. And for Rumi, because here, see the sister is going around this column here. So he used to stand around this column, spinning around the column. And his poetry was an outpouring at the emotion, at the deep emotional level. He wasn't writing anything, so they were. And so later on they would bring all the copies together and say, what did you write? And then they will, match and compare and make sure that which version was the correct one. They would write that down, and at the end they burned all the ones that probably people missed and did not write them completely. Yes.
So does that mean that did Rumi actually have the final word in terms of how it was compiled? Because the Mesnavi is a massive work.
It is massive, but it's not as massive as it has become. One of the reasons that Islamic thinkers became poets is not that because they loved poetry, especially Rumi. He didn't have much of a taste for poetry. But poetry became necessary because it was a medium or a means by which they could minimize or at least prevent plagiarism. So you had to have the skills. So poetry in Arabic and in Persian is very, very structured. There's a lot of layers and layers of internal rhyming and the meter. So if you don't have the skill, it's difficult to imitate someone. Because if it's regular prose, since they didn't have print shops, and every time someone copied it, they will add a word in the sentence here and there to their liking or what they understood. In spite of all this, people did add a lot to his work, which is, I think, essentially about 38,000 verses, but it ended up as close to 60,000. And back in the 1920s, a British scholar, Randall Nicholson, spent many, many years to go through almost every one of these lines to find out if they had relevance to the general theme of the discourse or not. and he marked them. The copy of the Masnavi that I have has the whole 60,000 with the particular lines that were questionable. They are marked with an asterisk, so you can jump over those ones.
But that's in Persian, right?
Poetry is not translatable. The time that I spent in translating this one, and of course I had to get some help too, I could have probably written 10 poems of my own. Because, you know, when you're translating a person like Rumi, you have to be faithful to the person, faithful to the thought, honest to the words and the language, and make sure. I missed one word. He used moon and I didn't in that cliff visioning through the patches of clouds and things like that. I missed that, and as I was driving here, he knocked. Although I would love to stay with you longer, but I'm due somewhere
Thank you so
further
much.
east.
Thank you so much, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.